Folks, welcome back to a brand new episode of Trainwreck Fantasy Football. I have a very fun show planned for you today. I'm going to be doing a live mock draft during the show, and I have a special guest join with me today, Ryan Talbot, Bills writer for the New York Upstate and Bills Updates. How you doing today, Ryan?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have some fun today, huh?
Yes, we are. I love fantasy football, so I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, yeah. So, again, we're going to be doing the mock draft here. Now, we settled on, we try to have like an average draft here. So we have 12 teams. We're going to be doing PPR scoring. And we're going to start with the fourth pick. Although it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about most of them and where people are going. But we're going to be drafting fourth for you guys. And it is a snake draft. So let's get into this. I already started it. So it went Zeke, Barkley, McCaffrey, first three. What are you feeling it for? Personally, how I draft, I like to go running back. I mean, I like to get my back out quick.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, it really depends on where you draft in the first round, because if you get stuck in the end of the first round, you might not have that premier back available, and you might have to go with the elite wide receiver instead. But in this scenario, Alvin Kamara is still on the board, and I see that right there. It says 91% of experts agree that he would be the best pick here. He's definitely a top 3, top 4 back, in my opinion, in fantasy football, in a PPR league especially. So that's definitely the direction that I would be going.
I would have to agree. So we are going to lock in Kamara here. I don't see where you wouldn't at 4. I mean, I see David Johnson right below him. I like it, but we're going to lock in Kamara here. Now, actually, so we did that. It's just ripping through into the second round. We're going to go over a couple picks here that it did end up taking. So after us, it went Le'Veon Bell 5th. I don't know if I would agree with that, but I guess he could be that premier back you're looking for. David Johnson 6th, and then I see where you're saying we started moving into the DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, Devontae Adams at the end of the first. How do you feel about those? I mean, Michael Thomas 12th. I mean, I think that's a steal.
Yeah, I agree. Thomas, I think, is maybe, I think you could argue that he is number 1 in terms of your fantasy wide receivers, especially in that New Orleans offense. But looking at the rest of that first round, you know, I think that's probably about where you're going to see Bell going in these drafts, 5-6 range. But the one thing you have to consider there is he's not going to have the same type of offensive line that he had in Pittsburgh. The Jets have gone out recently and tried to upgrade that line. Obviously, they were able to get Khalil out of retirement. They just traded for a reserve guard from Baltimore in the last week. So they're doing little things like that, but it's a whole different ball game. He's been out of action for a year. He does still have that value, though, obviously, in the PPR league with his receiving stats throughout his career. So I can see him going there. End of the round, though, like you said, I mean, Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, those are all those, and obviously Hopkins. Those are probably your top 3, top 4 wide receivers in this class or in this year's fantasy football draft. And then early on here in round 2, you see Patrick Mahomes come off the board. What do you think about quarterbacks going so early in the draft?
So personally, I wouldn't go anywhere near a quarterback here. Most people probably wouldn't. It does happen though. Some people are like, I want that quarterback. I do not like it. I personally, probably my first 6 picks are running backs and receivers. I fill those up quick because there's not depth once you get later. Maybe wide receiver, but running back, it drops off quick. Wide receivers, you can find them. But quarterbacks, like, yes, would I want Patrick Mahomes? But if you were to take him here, I mean, we'll look at this team's lineup at the end. Probably pretty rough in terms of depth at the other positions. I mean, would you be taking a quarterback this early?
No, absolutely not. In fact, in both of my leagues last year, that was the one position I held off on until absolutely double-digit rounds, I would say. So somewhere in probably that 10 to 12 area before I actually took one, just because I think there are at least 12 solid fantasy football quarterbacks out there. And then you can get guys later on the waiver wire too. No one would have expected Josh Allen to come on like he did last year in fantasy football, but towards the end of the season, he was one of the top guys. So I feel like quarterbacks, those are a lot easier to find, where you do need those premier running backs, and you do need to add some top tier talent at wide receiver as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we take our second round pick, which is very late, I need to ask you this. So I see Gurley went at 2.8. How do you feel about that?
I'm not. It's hard because of all the news you've read about him. You've read about his knee in the offseason. They still say that he's going to be their lead back, but is he really going to be the featured premier guy? Is it going to be more of a split load here? I have some concerns about Gurley. Now, where he was drafted, I think that I can understand it, but I have my own personal reservations about him. But when you're talking about round 2, pick 8, right in that area, I would consider him as well.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean Dalvin Cook's there. That's who it's saying is the next back up. So I'll tell you this, given healthy, I mean, I would take Gurley over him for sure. I actually, if we're looking at some of the backs here right now, Melvin Gordon's still there late in the second. I think I would take Melvin Gordon. But then again, you got to remember that the contract holdout. So never mind. Yeah. What about, okay, so here, we're here in the late in the second round. What are you thinking? Looking at these backs, I'll name off a few. Dalvin Cook's here, Melvin Gordon's here, Damon Williams, Kerryon Johnson. Some of the receivers still here: Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, T.Y. Hilton, Antonio Brown. Where would you be going here?
I always like to get another running back if possible, but like you were just saying, Melvin Gordon's in the holdout right now. I think that'll be resolved obviously sooner rather than later. I don't think he has much of a leg to stand on, like maybe Ezekiel Elliott has this year. So I think he will be back, but they still have other guys like Eckler there too that can take some of those goal line carries or some of those available carries their way. So I'd be leaning towards some of these wide receivers, and Evans is the favorite among the four that, according to this website. But I'd be really intrigued by Keenan Allen, and if you're feeling a little bit risky, maybe Antonio Brown. Brown, the whole drama with his helmet as of late, with his feet, the issues that he has going on there. But when he's on the field, I mean, this is a guy that is a premier wide receiver. But there's some risk to taking a guy like Brown this year.
No, absolutely. I mean, he was going first at some, years before. He was number one off the board, and Derek Carr was proven to almost be, I don't want to say MVP, but I mean, he had a fantastic year. He can sling the ball. They have playmakers there. They have Josh Jacobs to soften the load, but he is getting older and he is having these issues. Personally, I'd probably stray away from him, but I wouldn't judge it taking him here. So we'll let you take this pick. What are you locking in?
I'm going with Keenan Allen. And here's my thinking. When I looked at those 4 wide receivers that were on the top of the list, I'm looking at the quarterback play. Derek Carr, a little hit and miss for my liking. Andrew Luck is still dealing with some injury issues. The owner came out today and said it was something completely different than what everyone else was talking about. And I don't quite trust Jameis Winston right now either. So obviously, you have Phillip Rivers with the Chargers. He's a guy that's going to get the ball to Keenan Allen. So that's why I leaned that direction.
Yeah, I like that. And I also like it too because I like to draft players that are hopefully going to be on a good team. I think most people do that, but I really weigh heavy on it, and I think they're a fantastic team, and they were last year. So you can only imagine they're going to be doing well. So I like that pick. We took him. So now a couple more players off the board. We're going to be drafting 3-4 here. Melvin Gordon's gone. Williams left. Brown left at 3-1. Evans, Ertz are gone. So now we have T.Y. Hilton's left. I see an Adam Thielen, Amari Cooper, which I don't really like too much. Stephon Diggs as well. Now I also at the running back though we have Kerryon Johnson, Devontae Freeman, Fournette, Aaron Jones. What are you feeling there? Or are you feeling maybe a tight end?
I would at least look at the tight end at this placement. I still think you can get some solid guys. But the fact that you still have a George Kittle sitting in there on the board is really appealing to me, especially because I think that Evan Ingram's going to have a really good year with the Giants. I think O.J. Howard can have a pretty good year because they obviously lost some targets there in after they lost Adam Humphries in the slot and they lost Deshaun Jackson in the offseason. So the ball could be going his way more too. Hunter Henry, you never know with him injury-wise. So there's still some talent left at the tight end position, but I would argue that you could argue that Kittle is in that elite category at tight end, and he's a guy that once he's off the board, there is a pretty significant drop off after the position.
Yeah, so generally I'm one of those guys as well with quarterbacks late and tight ends late. Now, a third round George Kittle, he had a really good year, and he's probably just that top three tight ends with the Kelsey, Kittle, and Ertz, who are pretty consistent because that's what you don't get out of tight ends, which is why I always stray away. Personally, I probably would still stray away from Kittle just because I like to get that depth at running back and receiver because you can't really fill that later, and they are big points. But what would you lock in then?
Oh boy, I was going to let you take this one since I
Okay,
took Allen in round two.
I will. If you want, I will.
All right, you go ahead. Well, maybe we'll alternate rounds, make it intriguing.
All right, deal. So third round, 3.4. I'm taking Kerryon Johnson. I think he's going to have a great year. I do see Fournette there, which I kind of like, but he did so bad for me last year, and I don't like that offense too much. And I think the Lions are going to be in an up year, so I'm going to lock them in.
Yeah, I think that's a solid pick. I think he's being talked about a lot in the fantasy community. One thing I've noticed right now is our first three picks have three different bye weeks. Obviously, that's a good thing, but one thing that I will say is it seems like every year, at least one of my teams, I have like 3 or 4 guys that have the same bye week, and I never stray away from it because as bad as that week can go, I'm thinking long-term picture. But right now, it's actually working out kind of nicely for us.
Exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't specifically not draft someone for a bye, but it would be nice to have that if you can make it work. So now we're late into the fourth here. We're going to switch it over to overall rankings and see who's left. So, I mean, right now we got Alvin Kamara, Kerryon Johnson, and Keenan Allen. And some of the top players here is I see Chris Godwin, Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Boyd. What are you feeling here?
You know, Chris Godwin last year was one of my sleepers on our New York Upstate article. I loved his game. He had a huge year in Tampa. I think he ended up with something like 7 touchdowns. He wasn't quite at 1,000 yards, but he had one heck of a season. He's intriguing. Again, I go back to the quarterback play. I don't know if I necessarily trust Jameis Winston. Cooper Kupp is a guy that's going to get a lot of targets with the Rams. He's coming off of an injury. Boyd was just given a pretty decent deal with the Bengals. It's going to be interesting. You know, I don't know if I'm going to target a lot of Bengals just because I'm kind of going to wait and see with their new head coach. I know he comes from the Rams coaching tree there under McVay, but we've seen this before with other coaches where just because they come from a certain coaching tree, it doesn't necessarily pan out. Of those wide receivers, I'm feeling Chris Godwin. I love his game. I'm going to take a little bit of a risk there, I guess, considering his quarterback. But I think he can have a really good year. I was just talking about it with O.J. Howard, how Tampa lost 2 of their premier targets from in the offseason with Deshaun Jackson and Adam Humphrey. So the ball's going to get spread around more to their top targets. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, O.J. Howard. I think Godwin's going to have a really nice year.
Yeah, I'm a little bit different with you. I actually think Winston's going to have a good year, not strictly on success of the team, but I think he will be able to air the ball out a bit with that Mike Evans and again Chris Godwin, which I really like, the new coach. I think he will definitely have an up year personally. So I think Chris Godwin's a great pick there. I think he could be a very viable fantasy option. So I really like that pick. And now we're early in the 5th round here. So we still have the 2 running backs. We got the 2 wide receivers. I'm still a guy that's taken a wide receiver or maybe even another running back for that flex or wide receiver spot. So with that being said, we have Tyler Boyd still here, Alshon Jeffrey, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley still there. And for the running backs, I see Josh Jacobs is still up there, Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, James White. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I'm sticking to the wide receiver position again. This one will be your pick, but of those wide receivers, there's a lot of noise around DJ Moore this year in Carolina. They're expecting big things out of him. I think Calvin Ridley is going to have a really nice year too. So those 2 names are really appealing. Alshon Jeffrey, I think I would have him underneath Moore and Ridley personally, but I think you could make an argument for Boyd, Moore, or Ridley if those are your top 3 or if those are the options that you're looking at.
Yeah, so personally, I'm liking DJ Moore a little bit, and mainly because I'm not high on Cam. I never really liked him. I didn't like his attitude. I didn't like the team. I mean, they didn't play well after that huge year, was 2015. But they have a revamped O-line. I mean, Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield only helps these players. And I think Cam Newton is going to have an up year. As much as I don't like doing it, I think I'm going to lock in DJ Moore. And I do like Boyd, but just I feel like that team's gonna have such a down year that I just don't want to do it. So on a personal level, I'm gonna lock in DJ Moore here in the
That's
fifth round.
fair. Definitely fair. The one thing I will say though is teams that have down years usually have to throw the ball a little bit more too. So, you could argue it the other way as well that Boyd could be a beneficiary for that. But I
Absolutely.
completely agree with your thinking. I like Moore. I like the hype around him. So definitely someone to buy into.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I want to say here, see him at 6'6". I heard a lot about this guy, Dante Pettis. I mean, he's off the board, but I mean, where do you have an opinion on him at that value? Because I think he was a nice sleeper. And in the 6th round, I think that actually might be a decent pick. I mean, I still see Christian Kirk on the board for us here, Marvin Jones, Will Fuller, but you know what I mean? What are you thinking on that?
Well, I think that's good value for where he went. I think there's a lot of upside to his game. San Francisco, it's going to be important for them to see Jimmy Garoppolo over the course of an entire season. Although they had a few backups come in last year and play and actually play pretty well in Shanahan's offense. But I think that Pettis of that wide receiver core might have the highest upside. So I think that's a good spot for him to go.
Yeah, so keep that in mind because I see a lot of sleepers on him. So maybe if you are looking to target him, he's maybe going to go around somewhere there. So it's good to know. So what are you thinking here now? I mean, I see a couple quarterbacks going off the board too. Andrew Luck's gone now. Aaron Rodgers is gone. Just for instance, I will pull it up for you. Baker's still there. Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, which I would personally still go not like a running back or receiver here and fill that flex/depth spot. But
yeah, there's still too much talent at quarterback, and this is how it usually goes. Can you see further down the quarterback list to see who's still there? I mean, those are the top 4, but I feel like there's probably even more talent underneath that.
oh yeah, I mean, here's the list of them. It goes
Russell Wilson,
I
Drew
don't know.
Brees, Goff. I mean, you look at that's still stacked. And then obviously, even looking in that second tier, you have Lamar Jackson, who was a fantasy stud, Phillip Rivers, we've already talked about, Josh Allen down there at number 20, who had a big year. So there's still a lot of talented quarterbacks. So I would still stray away from that. Tom Brady at 21. So I'm still straying away from quarterback altogether. Let's go back to running back. Let's see what they have at running back.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple good players here still. I mean, James White, I know a lot of people are still high on him. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I like White a lot. I think he could be in for a really big year. Philip Lindsay had a great year in Denver last year. Drake, I'm hesitant to go after any Dolphins players this year. I think they're going to have a down year, and that's going to cause them not to run the ball as much. I think he's a talented guy. Then you have Cohen as the 4th option. Can we see who else is on that running back list?
Yeah. So looking here, Rashad Penny's still there. Latavius Murray, I know with Kamara there, but Ingram and Kamara proved to be complete fantasy options through these years. What are you thinking out of these guys?
Well, there's some talent in that next level too. We already talked about Eckler in terms of what he could do this year, depending on the holdout. Penny, didn't necessarily have the greatest rookie season in Seattle, but he was drafted in the 1st round. He'll get his looks. Lamar Miller is still going to be the guy in Houston. I've never been a huge Lamar Miller fan in terms of fantasy football. I would probably go. I would go with Philip Lindsay here, and I know you have Royce Freeman. I know there's some talent there, but I think that Lindsay proved last year that he's a very capable back. I think that he's going to have another solid season, and there's a lot worse you can do for your flex or later on your bench than Philip Lindsay.
Yeah, and actually, I'm seeing the average draft position here is 45. I mean, we're getting them at what? We're at, in the draft, we're at 6.9 here, so we're up there. I think that's a solid steal there. So yeah, let's draft him up there and see what else we got after that. I mean, there's still some good players coming off the board here, which we've stated both together. I'm straying away from tight ends and QBs. I mean, we have a filled lineup. I'm probably still going to go and get that depth because you never know with injuries and you get a star like that. There's just so much depth at the QB because there's only one QB on the team. I know that's not for every league, but I mean, looking here now, as we have a nice little glitch there. A wide receiver I'm seeing Curtis Samuel, Cortland Sutton. I mean, Golden Tate's got that suspension. He's getting drafted pretty high there. James White is still on the board there. I like Tariq Cohen here. I'm liking him a lot here. And actually, something I want to ask you, I see Tavon Coleman still there over at San Francisco. Do you think he's a fantasy option? I mean, clearly he'll be a fantasy option, but I mean, Jerick McKinnon's there. Didn't play all last year, though. He got paid big. Tavon Coleman always was a second back. I mean, are the points going to be there?
Well, it's going to be, again, a similar type situation where they're going to split the workload. Some weeks, a guy like Coleman could win you a game. Other weeks, he's going to be sitting there with 2, 3 points. And you're going to wonder why you have him in your lineup. That's the frustrating thing there. I like your option for Cohen. I know you already said he would be suspended, but I would consider Golden Tate here too. I know that he's in line for that suspension, although he has a very good case against it. But even if he's suspended the first 4 weeks, we still have Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore as the top three. You could kind of stash him away, and when he does come back, I know they have Sterling Shepard, but I think Tate is pretty much a 1A, 1B situation there in terms of their wide receiver situation. I could see him having a pretty decent year and having good value when we look back on it at this point.
Are you worried about Daniel Jones, Eli Manning at all? I mean, that doesn't affect your decision with that at all?
Yes and no. Similar situation to what I was saying with a team like the Dolphins. They might find themselves behind a lot again, and Eli Manning and or Daniel Jones, when he gets in there, could be throwing the ball quite a bit. And a guy like Tate, you're going to want to get the ball to your playmakers, or at least try to. So I think that he's at least going to get those opportunities to make plays. But you raise a valid point. There's definitely some risk there. Whereas if you look up a spot, Geronimo Allison has Aaron Rodgers throwing to him. So you do have to consider that. But at that point, I still like Tate's value. But like you said, if you want to go running back there, I completely get it.
Yeah, so on a personal level, I'm going running back, and mainly because in a PPR league, I seem to find more depth at receiver, whether it's still in this draft, but let alone the waiver wires it come season. So I feel like there would be more options rather than running back. So I'm going to take that Tariq Cohen here. And the average draft position for Golden Tate is clearly dropped. It was at around like 137, it said. So maybe we can even stash him next round too.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to snag Tariq Cohen here, and we'll see how this plays out. I'm seeing more quarterbacks come off the board, more running backs, and now a bunch of wide receivers. So as we're looking here, in terms of wide receiver, Golden Tate's still there. I mean, it's your pick.
Yeah, let's look at tight end. Let's go back to tight end here.
Yeah, I mean, what do we have? Okay, Vance McDonald, Njoku, Hooper, Delaney Walker. Getting old.
Oh boy, it's getting a little thinner here.
Yeah, it's getting shaky.
I am tempted by Njoku. I think that Baker Mayfield's going to spread that ball around. I think that he's a great athlete. I'm intrigued by him here. Can we see what else is left at tight end?
Yeah.
I don't want to overdraft the guy, but at the same time, it's getting to be pretty slim pickings at tight end, and I want to at least get a guy that I think can help me win some games. So, they have Vance McDonald ranked ahead of him in Pittsburgh's offense, which I get. I've had Austin Hooper in a few different leagues, kind of hit and miss in his career. You get to that next tier down, and you're talking about injury concerns with guys like Jordan Reed, Kyle Rudolph, Greg Olson. I do love TJ Hawkinson down there, but do you really want to depend on a rookie as your number one tight end? I would probably say no. So maybe not the popular choice here, but I'm going to go with Njoku. I'm going to go with the tight end here. I feel like there is a pretty decent drop-off after he and McDonald come off the board.
Yeah, I mean, I like him there too. He's a great player. Baker Mayfield's clearly going to be airing the ball out. I mean, the only thing that worried me a little bit is there is a lot of options on that offense, but that could just be a good thing. I mean, they could just be like the Chiefs were last year, just spreading points around wherever they can go, So I like that pick there. I like getting that tight end spot filled. So now at this point, we are in the 9th round. We don't have a quarterback yet. Technically, we have a full lineup and one bench player with Tariq Cohen. For the sake of it, I'm going to take a peek at the quarterbacks. I mean, you got Goff, Murray, Winston, Roethlisberger. But even behind that, I mean, you still got Phillip Rivers. I know Kirk Cousins, a lot of people don't like him, but he throws a lot of yards. Josh Allen's still there. Brady. I still don't want to go there yet. I mean, what would you think?
Yeah, no, I completely get your point there. One thing I also try to do, if the situation works out, and it's not always the situation that happens, I sometimes like to find a quarterback that matches up with one of my premier wide receivers to get those double points. So even if we sit and wait and we end up getting a guy like Philip Rivers here in a few rounds, you have that Rivers Allen connection double point situation. So something that you could definitely focus on there.
Yeah, I mean, I like that too. So, I mean, what would we have here? We'd have Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore. In terms of QBs, I mean, Jameis Winston would be here for our Godwin. I'm
Yeah,
kind
I
of,
would still pass. I would still pass on quarterback right now.
yeah, no, I know. I'm just in terms of it, but again, yeah, there's just so many players down there. I would have to do it as well. Now, we have that four running backs at this point, so I'm gonna look wide receivers here. Now Golden Tate is still here because of that average draft position. You've talked him up here. I mean, what are
I
you
have,
thinking?
I
I,
have, and if you
I'm
look,
kind of liking him here too.
it does say best seven, but then the average draft ADP is at 132. I think there's when we already have our starting wide receivers filled out, and you're talking about having him on the bench. It's not like we're taking this guy to contribute immediately. I would argue that this could actually benefit a fantasy owner come playoff time. Tate's legs might be a little bit fresher because he didn't play the first 4 weeks of the season. At that point, yeah, it might be Daniel Jones to see what they have in the young quarterback. But like you said, or like we've said, sometimes when these bad teams get into those situations where they're behind, they're throwing the ball all the time in the second half. So a guy like Tate could put up some big yards. I would say roll the dice on Tate at this point.
I like it too. I'm doing it because I mean, when you put it out that way too, Daniel Jones is in and he throws 3 picks in that game. I mean, he's still going to get some yards. It's got to go to someone. Doesn't affect my wide receiver. So I took Tate here. Royce Freeman's here. Philip Lindsay, we have him on our flex right now. Some people like to package him in with their other player because I liked Philip Lindsay. It's why we drafted him, but you never know whether it's an injury or not. I mean, do you like doing that? Generally, I don't. We are getting later in the draft, so there's a reason for it. Would you suggest to do that for people or?
Later in the draft, absolutely I would. Not or I don't like it when you do it too early in the draft, but like you said, we only have what is it? How many bench positions left? Is there 3?
There's 3 bench positions
So
left. Yeah.
we could do a lot worse than a Royce Freeman, and like you said, in these leagues, you can find pretty good wide receivers off the waiver wire throughout the season because players emerge, injuries happen. Running backs are still king, in my opinion, in fantasy football in terms of you want to have one or two solid guys, and it's a lot harder because when you get to the waiver wire, everyone's putting in a claim for someone that has a breakout game. So wouldn't hurt to pick up Royce Freeman here in case maybe he breaks out this year, or if there's an injury like you said. Definitely an option here. So yeah, let's take Royce Freeman.
Let's do it. Yeah. I mean, that's a great player to have with that. You never know what's going to happen. And Lindsay goes down or has maybe even just took the role. There you go. You're good to go. So now we are early into the 11th round. We still don't have a quarterback, still don't have a D or a kicker, and we have 2 bench spots left. But I mean, I'm still seeing some players here. I do see Dion Lewis. Hines is here, Ronald Jones, Peyton Barber. In terms of wide receivers, I see Kenny Stills, Jamison Crowder, Sanu still there. What are you thinking here?
I think Crowder's going to have a big year in New York out of the slot. I think he's going to get targeted a lot. I do like the fact that Jared Goff is still available at quarterback. I don't know if I'd want to roll the dice one more round on that because I do think that in terms of fantasy, he produces pretty consistently in that Rams offense. So, I know his average draft position is 101. But at this point, maybe I'm not the risky enough, but I think I'm going to go with Jared Goff here. I know we don't necessarily have a handcuff for him in terms of like a wide receiver to get those double points, but still value Sean McVay's offense. He's going to have a pretty decent season, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. I mean, that he's got a nice space between. Kyler Murray could have a good year, but I mean, he was the next up, then Winston, then Roethlisberger. I think it's someone at this point when you're in the 11th round, three players on your bench, lineup filled, and I mean, I want to take him here too, which we're going to do, but it's just a prime point is you don't have to take these quarterbacks so early because look what we're getting in the 11th round, a Jared Goff. I mean, I think that's a fantastic steal at this point in the draft. And now as this goes on, we're looking like, okay, we get Kyler Murray still there, but doesn't matter to us now. I'm still seeing that Dion Lewis. I'm seeing that Hines, Adrian Peterson's there. In terms of wide receivers, I'm seeing Kenny Stills, Sanu, Traquan Smith, Albert Wilson. What would you be going here?
I would still be maybe digging down a little bit more into the wide receivers, and I'd also go back to tight end too, just because last few years I've been able to add some decent tight ends on my bench, and eventually someone comes calling and looking for someone, and you can swing that and get something that you need at a position of need. You look at what's left at tight end. You have Jordan Reed, again, one of the talented as can be when healthy, but just always seems to be bitten by the injury bug. Mark Andrews out there in Baltimore had a nice season. You have Jack Doyle, Kyle Rudolph. Who else do we have down further in that list?
Yeah, we got some ballers here. Jimmy Graham.
And yeah, boy, Hawkinson's off the board too. That's too bad.
Noah Fant.
Noah Fant, if we want to, roll the dice there a little bit.
Jason Witten.
Oh boy. One thing I will say, and I think you could probably get him maybe on the waiver wire, is Mike Gesicki there out of Miami. Last year, he was used so poorly by that coaching staff. He was used as a blocker a lot, and that's clearly not his game. I am intrigued. Again, we don't want to necessarily pile up our bench with guys that are suspended. I do like Chris Herndon. I think that he had a really nice year with the Jets last year. I think he is going to be a nice fantasy option. But like we said, we already have a guy at wide receiver in Golden Tate who's going to start the year suspended. Maybe don't want to have two guys at skill positions in that regard, but there's a name to kind of consider later on in the draft too. Looking over at the wide receiver, let's see what we have here. Still some talented guys left at wide receiver too.
Yeah, we're trying to get there. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot taken off, but that's the thing. I mean, once you get down into PPR, some of these players, even if they're not that good, it's PPR, man. I mean, 5 points, 50 yards, it's easy points. So we're looking at like a Traquan Smith's up here, Adam Humphries, Quincy Enunwa, which was, I mean, he had some decent games last year. Devontae Parker's there, Debu Samuel. What would you be thinking here?
Looking at that list, I actually love Adam Humphries. I'm surprised to see that he is still available. I think he's going to get targeted a lot by Marcus Mariota out of the slot. So for those PPR stats, I know he's a little bit down there. I know there's some guys still available above him, but I'm going Adam Humphries.
Yeah, I actually really like that too. That's a great person to stash on your bench who could easily become a starter in your lineup. I mean, given a bye week or given just what he could do. And let's go ahead and lock that in. So his average draft position was 181, but you got to remember late in these rounds when we only have a couple picks left, you pick what you want, who you think's going to have a good year. I mean, and now as we get into the 13th, I'm still seeing that Jordan Reed there, which like you said, he does have a very high ceiling, but it's still just, it's very risky with him. I mean, Kenny's still there. Into the running back as much as we have a decent amount. Dion Lewis is still there. What would you be thinking here? I see Ito Smith. A lot of people, they're not agreeing with that, but,
Yeah, there's still a lot of talent at those positions, too. I know defense and kicker are usually my last two picks. Just for the sake of it, though, let's look at what's available on defense.
Chargers are there, though.
The Chargers are there, and boy, they're expected to be a really good defense this year.
That's enticing.
Yeah, it is. You know what? I'm going to go away from my normal strategy. Let's take the Chargers because on paper, that's a pretty good defense.
Yeah, I mean, there's defenses that can put up a pretty penny some weeks, and if there's going to be one of them, that's one. I agree. I usually wouldn't do it, but with 3 picks left and the Chargers are just sitting there, yeah, I think the points are going to be there. So now we move into the late 14th round. So we got our D, so we're going to get away from that. For the sake of it, though, Broncos are still there. The Bills, I see the Eagles, Seahawks. So there's still some teams there, but I would definitely take the Chargers over them. Do we even want to look at a kicker here? I think we try to fill that last position.
Yeah, that's last. That's definitely last.
All right. So I see Winston. Well, this is for instance for the quarterbacks. Winston's still there. Roethlisberger's still there. Prescott's still there. Phillip Rivers is still there. Obviously, we have our quarterback. Some people might even want to have a backup. Or would you still think fill that wide receiver, running back depth, or maybe tight end?
Maybe tight end, just because. And we, don't get me wrong. You have until week 7 with Njoku before he goes on his bye, and there could be someone that emerges by then. But it wouldn't hurt to have someone on your bench that you can at least monitor, see how they do. You obviously want to get someone at tight end that's not on bye week 7. The system says Mark Andrews is your top choice. Mark Andrews did have a really solid year, so it wouldn't be a bad pick by any means. And you look at some of the depth, it gets pretty bad fast down there. You see Charles Clay at 34, rookie Irv Smith Jr. at 36. If you want to live dangerously, you have Fant at 23. Herndon at 22, who I've already said I really like his game, but he's out for a little while. I would probably go Mark Andrews in this scenario, just because
I like him there too.
We have filled our bench quite a bit with different wide receivers and tight ends. And like you said, you can still find some wide receiver gems in season on the waiver wire.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the tight ends get really iffy. And sometimes just like a roulette, you're just flipping out every week. So yeah, let's fill that tight end spot. So now with that done, I'm just going to go over a couple people that are still left that it's ranking up there again for the sake of it. You have your, we went over those quarterbacks. Those are all still there. Wide receivers, Albert Wilson, Marquise Goodwin, Quincy Enunwa Smith. In terms of running backs, C.J. Anderson, Giovanni Bernard, Jamal Williams, Mike Davis. That one's, I guess that could be. But those are some of the players that are still left in this final round of the draft. Just so you are aware who is still left there. But we have to get a kicker. So let's move into the kickers. I'm seeing Harrison Butker, Will Lutz. I never really care too much on him. They're saying Butker's the best here. What would you think? Do you really care too much about it?
Well, usually I don't, but in this case, I would say that Butker's going to have the opportunity to score a lot of points in Kansas City's offense, whether it's extra points or field goals, because that team's going to move the ball pretty well based on how well they did last year. So if I'm thinking, if I'm looking at these other options, yeah, Lutz has a chance in New Orleans offense to do the same. I really like Deshaun Watson, but there's still some issues there with that offensive line, so I don't think they're in the same tier in terms of putting up points. Green Bay, Mason Crosby, they were a little hit and miss last year offensively. So I would stick with those top 2 choices. But yeah, I'm going to go with the Kansas City kicker, just based on that offense around him and the fact that he's most likely going to be kicking multiple extra points and or field goals every single week.
Oh, yeah. They're just always in the red zone, whether they're scoring, getting you just the point, or just giving you the field goal. So I think that is a great pick there as well. So with that, the draft is done. They're just filling in the kickers here. We got an A- grade, a 92 out of 100. So I think we did pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm pretty happy with this draft. I think it looks pretty good on paper. And then, like we've said numerous times, you monitor the players in season. You can obviously drop a guy or two off your bench. Here's another thing. If you see someone in week 1 or week 2 who has a big game, we could drop a guy like Golden Tate, who's going to be suspended for a few more weeks at this point, and pick that person up instead if we think that person's on the right trajectory this year. So there's still a lot of different ways you can improve your roster in fantasy football, but overall, I think this was a pretty solid job between the two of us.
Yeah, out of a 12-man league, getting Goff super late, Kamara, we got Kerryon Johnson, Keenan Allen's probably going to, he's our number 1 there, but he's going to have a great year. Chris Godwin could be a number 1 receiver, which we got. DJ Moore, Njoku. I really like the player. I actually really like our bench. From Tariq Cohen to Golden Tate could come out. Royce Freeman could be that package off of Phillip Lindsay. Adam Humphrey super late, and then that Mark Andrews as well. So I'm really liking it. And if you want, we could even look here, what unraveled for the other teams. Let's see. I
Yeah,
mean,
looking.
Travis Kelce
Let's
first
see.
round. I don't like that.
No, looking at that. What was the? We said we were going to look back at one of the
Was
teams
it
that took.
team three?
I thought it was.
I see they took McCaffrey,
You
round
see the
two.
McCaffrey in round one,
Oh,
so they went back to back, and then they went tight end. Wow.
yeah.
That said, if I look at their first two wide receivers, I do like Cooper Kupp. I do like Tyler Lockett.
They did get Christian
Christian
Kirk.
Kirk, there's some risk there. Obviously, that'll come down to the rookie quarterback and his play. Hunter Henry, there's some injury concerns there. So going back to back with McCaffrey and Cook, it was actually pretty solid for that team, especially getting Ertz and two solid wide receivers after that. But there's also some risk involved. Boy, oh boy, team five, Bell, Gurley, Fournette. If two of those guys, if Gurley shows he is truly completely healthy, that's going to be a solid lineup, tough to beat, especially in terms of the running back position. But they did wait quite a while on wide receiver with Alshon Jeffrey, Sterling Shepard as their top two guys. Any other teams that stand out to you?
Yeah, this one looks like a risky team, but it could extremely pay off. So it was the first pick. They took Ezekiel Elliott, which I think is the number one ranked running back. Now, of course, with the holdout, it's extremely scary. But given he does play, him at number one is obviously a great pick. They got Melvin Gordon in the last pick of the second round, which I rank him at the top 5 running back personally. I love that he can go out of the backfield. I love they had a good team. But they got him in the second, and then Antonio Brown in the third. I mean, he's got a high ceiling, clearly.
Yeah, there's risk reward right there. That's the name of that team.
This is a gambling team.
Because if Gordon comes back by week 1, they might have to ease him into the lineup, but by playoff time, that's a roster that could be reckoned with. If Antonio Brown is healthy, I was always a big fan of Allen Robinson back in his Jacksonville days. Landry is usually a guy in a PPR league that can get you decent stats. I'm a fan of Marvin Jones, not necessarily from a fantasy perspective, just the player himself. And then you grab Baker Mayfield too, so you do get some of those double points with Landry and Baker Mayfield, which again we talked about, and that's something I try to do when the opportunity arises. But yeah, very interesting team there.
Yeah, Latavius Murray in the 8th. I see they snagged McKinnon, then Breed at 10th and 9th, so they're dropping pretty far. If you're a gambler, I mean, that's a great team. It's risky, but high reward if those two come out playing. Like we said, anything else stick out to you? I mean, I see some of the quarterbacks going off not too early. What's that?
Oh, I was going to say that team with Nick Chubb I think is another one that I love Smith-Schuster. I think that's a solid pick. Mack, I expect to be their lead back, but with Indianapolis, you never know. Love Woods, Watkins, there's some pretty big risk there. Mike Williams is a solid wide receiver with the Chargers, but he had, obviously as a rookie, had some injury concerns. Newton, you and I have talked about quite a bit from a quarterback perspective, fantasy perspective. Did get the handcuff there though, or a partner to throw to with Curtis Samuel. That's an interesting team in my opinion as well. But yeah, like we were talking about, a lot of these quarterbacks, quality quarterbacks, you can wait on. You don't have to jump up there for a Mahomes, who is usually going round 1, maybe round 2. I know that he led all quarterbacks in fantasy scoring by a pretty wide margin last year. But by going that direction, you're really sacrificing something at running back or wide receiver, where you're going to have to pick up ground with someone. So there's a lot of risk with that, where we waited almost until the end, and we got a guy that had a great year last year, helped his team get all the way to the Super Bowl. So I think that the waiting on a quarterback is always a strategy to go with.
Yeah, so I see two things sticking out to me here. I want your opinion on them. I see Kareem Hunt in the 11th is right next to him with Carlos Hyde over at KC. I mean, any opinion on him? Is that worth it that late? I mean, Kareem Hunt was a star player, and he's on Cleveland. He's got this.
Yeah, I actually like that when I saw it go through the system there when they were making the picks. I think getting Hunt that late is worth it. I know you have Chubb in Cleveland as well. But in the 11th round, I mean, injuries, especially at running back, happen all the time. He's a guy that was a star in Kansas City. I think he can be a star on the field with Cleveland as well. We've talked about that talent. So in the 11th round, absolutely worth taking.
Yeah, it looks like even like Josh Allen didn't even get taken off the board. So I mean, there's still some ballers out there. I mean, that's the point. Where is that quarterback? I know we talked a little bit the tight end. We did end up taking a couple, but that quarterback, I don't like taking him so early. Again, you do your strategy, but on a personal level, I think we're on the same boat where late in that draft, you can get some solid players like 7th, 8th round. We saw Baker going out to Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, Cam Newton. 8th was Jackson, Breeze, Wentz. We got Goff in the 11th. Kyler Murray went in the 12th, and that was the last quarterback taken. So,
yeah. And I see LaShawn McCoy, I believe, went round 10, but then round 13, the rookie running back, Devin Singletary, went. If you're in a deep league, I don't think actually, if you're in a dynasty league, especially dynasty league, he's going to go a lot earlier than around 13. But
yeah,
I think Devin Singletary is someone to keep an eye on early in your dynasty leagues. You might not get a lot of bang for your buck early on this year, but the vision that he's shown through training camp, the elusiveness that he's shown, I could see him being a big part of this offense by mid-year, end of the year, and then obviously going forward. So that's a completely different format, of course, but even in these standard fantasy football drafts, the 1-year deal, it doesn't hurt to pick up a guy like Singletary, but he's one of those guys that I think in some leagues he'll be on the waiver wire. He's definitely someone that you'd want to be monitoring throughout the season.
Yeah, especially with some of those leagues. Again, they're all different. I noticed some have some big benches. I mean, I settled with 5 on the bench. Again, I think that's a good average, but I've seen benches with 7, 8. So, I mean, when you come down to that, we'd have, 3 more rounds, 2 more rounds. I think that's someone you'd probably target as like you never know. You never know. It's Jordan Reed in the 14th. I mean, I would have taken him in the 14th. That's not a bad player to snag up. Dion Lewis was in the 13th. So there's players out there. There's some good players to watch in those late rounds where some people value those first ones more. I think you win it off those late rounds.
Oh, I agree completely. And then the last thing I noticed is Robert Foster went in round 12. I'm not sure Cole Beasley went at all. In a PPR league, I think Cole Beasley could actually have a pretty decent year. Maybe he did go and I just missed him. But Josh Allen has been targeting him early and often. This, training camp, even today, that joint practice with the Panthers. So it's very possible that a guy like Cole Beasley is someone to monitor, maybe pick up with your last pick in the draft, or just kind of monitor and keep an eye on throughout the season. Because if he opens up the year with a 7-8 reception game, you could do a lot worse than that in a PPR league, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to cover 2 more things before we leave. So I pulled up the people that did not get drafted, and we're just going to run through the QBs, wide receivers, and running backs because we could see who literally did not get taken. And this is out of, it was 15 rounds. So looking at it, I mean, in terms of quarterbacks, there probably would have been a couple more taken because I know some people like to get them on their bench. I guess it depends on the league you're in. But I mean, Winston's still there, Roethlisberger, Prescott, Rivers, Cousins, Trubisky, Josh Allen, Tom Brady, Garoppolo, Stafford. I mean, look at the depth that's still there, which I'd probably be okay with having start for my team.
Yeah, there's a ton of talent. Even going down to 25, Carr. They brought in Antonio Brown for a reason, so he's going to be throwing the ball more this year. I think he could kind of have a rebound fantasy season and be up there too. So the fact that he's sitting there, you mentioned Kirk Cousins, the guy that gets a ton of yards. Phillip Rivers still sitting there, a really, really good quarterback. So tons of talent at quarterback. And I get that of all the positions, that's going to be the deepest in terms of talent available. But still kind of surprising to see some of those names.
Yeah, so I think I usually chalk it up as don't feel pressured into snagging a quarterback. Like, you can find them. So here's some running backs left. Yeah, I mean, this is what I don't like because I feel like the depth isn't really here. I mean, like I'm seeing a C.J. Anderson over in Detroit, Giovanni Bernard, Jamal Williams in Green Bay. I mean, is anyone that's really sticking out here? I see Frank Gore, T.J. Yeldon.
Yeah, of those names, I'd keep an eye on Pollard just based on the Ezekiel Elliott holdout. He's getting a lot of rave reviews as of late. I don't think he's a long-term option, But if you're someone that takes Ezekiel Elliott in round 1 or round 2, I'd be getting Pollard in the last or second to last round as a handcuff, because he's the guy that's getting a lot of the love this offseason. Whether or not that comes to fruition, we'll see. And then also, Giovanni Bernard, I wouldn't really necessarily want him on my roster after a draft. Someone I would watch, though, on the waiver wire, based on, again, they bring in Zach Taylor. He comes from that Sean McVay offense. If that Bengals offense even comes close, has half the success that McVay did, Bernard could be a guy that does some damage as a receiver out of the backfield. But overall, it's kind of slim pickings there at running back, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's why I like to scoop those guys up super early, and why I try to stress it. If you're in my league, you could take a quarterback tight end first, but if you're in your own league, I say fill up on those wide receivers and running backs. So with the wide receivers, I know we kind of talked about some that got drafted, but some that are left. Anything that's sticking out here, I see Deebo Samuel, Devontae Parker from Miami, Marquise Goodwin's there. No one that's really, again, sticking out per se, but
yeah,
what do you think?
And again, it just comes down to, I think, again, keep an eye on some of these guys on the waiver wire. Andy Isabella, for instance, could pick up some instant chemistry there in Arizona. He was a guy that the coaching staff loved and said that was actually part of the reason they traded Josh Rosen. They showed it in the video. They're like, man, we really like this Isabella kid. I don't think he'll be there with our next pick. I think they have big plans for Isabella. Devontae Parker seems to always have really nice offseason or gets hyped up, and then he never does anything in the regular season. He's high up there on the list of guys available. And then, you have some rookies. Deebo Samuel could end up having a nice year. You have a guy like A.J. Brown in Tennessee. And then you also have some speedsters. John Ross had some success in terms of touchdowns, but really inconsistent as a wide receiver. So no one that really jumps off the screen is, boy, I need to have them. I do see deep down there, I'm a Notre Dame fan, Equanimous St. Brown. I wouldn't be surprised if he emerges in Green Bay's offense this season. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a guy that you want to have on your fantasy team. And then I do see Cole Beasley sitting there, and I think Beasley could end up being a surprise in fantasy football this year, especially those PPR leagues.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to point these out is because some people with their, if you have, that 16, 17, 18 round drafts, maybe you're just on your last pick, you're like, you know what, I want to snag someone for the sake of it. Yeah, Beasley's not getting drafted here, so all those players really not getting drafted here. And it's someone to keep an eye on, because if you were thinking you like him, you have a chance to get him, or, if you don't want him to fall to the waiver wire, don't draft him at 10, 11, 12 or something. Take him at, you got him 16, 17, where he's not really going to get taken. So there's some players there, but definitely I'd say that quarterback, there's a lot of depth. Running back, not much, and wide receiver, we are seeing some. If you want, we could even take a peek at some of the tight ends here real quick.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's see what we got. I'm seeing Tyler Eifert. What do you see? Kyle Rudolph still there.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to go back to Chris Herndon. I thought he had a really nice season with Sam Darnold last year. He'll be suspended the first 4 weeks of the season. But I do think that he will be a consistent contributor for the Jets when he gets back there. Kyle Rudolph, when healthy, is a solid guy. There's still some talented players there. Cameron Braid at one point was getting a lot of love in the fantasy community. I want to say last year. I saw in Arizona, Ricky Seals-Jones had a nice preseason game, and they're saying, oh, maybe we were a year too early on the fantasy hype surrounding him. And the list goes on. Maybe a guy like Lacoste in New England surprises, because right now there's not a lot of options for them at tight end in terms of what they would obviously have gotten out of a guy like Rob Gronkowski. There's going to be a significant fall off, but at the same time, Tom Brady's going to get one of those tight ends involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So again, there is some players there as well. So I like what the tight ends we got. I'm pretty satisfied with that. But I'd go back to those wide receivers, running backs. Get the backs early. There's still some depth at receiver, but I'd like to fill the lineup how we did. And I'm actually pretty happy where we got Goff super late. And I'm happy where we got Njoku, and we even got that Mark Andrews super late. So I think we had a pretty pretty good draft and a pretty good idea. I know this is a computer drafting, but it gives you a pretty good idea just where those players are going. And if you were targeting someone and we said he went in the 11th, it's something to keep in mind. Maybe he'll go in 13 or yours, or maybe 10th in yours. So that's the best way I can put and use this episode as something to help you in your draft.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I'm excited to hear what people think of our group here when we post this. I think there's going to be a lot of positive reviews, but no matter what you do in fantasy football, there's going to be one or two people that knock it. So I'm interested to hear what people think of our team.
Yeah, right. We get completely trashed. I kind of want to draft this team specifically now, just so if it does win, I could be like, well, look what I did,
Yeah,
so I'll have to try to get this whole team in one league just to cover our backs here.
I like it.
If it sounds like a plan. All right, Ryan, thanks for coming on. I had a great time doing this. It was really fun just kind of seeing where these players went. I only did one a couple weeks ago, but again, everything changes by the week. So take it as you must. And again, the best way to take it is just where those players are going. Try to base it off your league. Maybe if you had a 10-man league, some of the players that won the 11th would drop back. And that's another way to just help you with the draft. So again, thanks for coming on. Let us know what you thought of the episode. Let us know what you thought of the roster we drafted and maybe where some of the players were going. And with that, good night now.